We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I'm here today with Melanie McDaniel of Freestyle Capital Group. Melanie, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. I had to click back over to the sheet to make sure I got that mouthful of Freestyle Capital Group right, so that everybody knows what we are talking about. So, Melanie, why don't you start by kind of telling us a little bit about your background, where you're from, what you do, and then where you're from, what you did, and then on into how you got into capital raising, and we can kind of dissect everything from there.
Alrighty. So background, grew up in Utah
Okay.
in a, normal house, middle of the road, sort of go to school and then get a job. Well, go to school and then go to school again and then you get a job.
Yep.
Um, I kind of at a young age already was pushing back against that because I didn't really know what I wanted to go to school for. So I joined the military instead.
Ah,
And it's not because necessarily I wanted to serve my country, though, that was kind of at one of the bottom of the list of one of the reasons. But the top reason was I wanted to travel the world, get out from under my parents' wings, get money for school when I was ready to go to school, and just be on my own 2 feet. So the military
sure.
gave me that. Got lucky. I joined the Navy, and Italy was my first duty station. So I hit that travel box pretty quick. So I did
Awesome.
my 4 years, and when I was getting out, I didn't really know what I wanted to be still when I grew up. But I thought, well, maybe if I did something I loved, then I'd be happy, right? So
Mhm.
I started thinking about what I loved. I love to travel. So what did I study? Travel. I have a degree in hospitality and travel administration.
Interesting.
I know, weird. That was in Denver, Colorado. And then my first job was working on a submarine off Waikiki. And it didn't take too long for me to realize that I didn't really want to climb a corporate ladder, but I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I kind of fell back into what I understood, and that was get a job specifically with the government. My dad worked for the Utah State Prison. His wife was a park ranger for the National Park Service. So I ended up being a park ranger. And I thought I could just do that by myself some time, but I ended up doing that for 9 years. So that was a big chunk of my history, my past.
Interesting.
2015, I
Kind of
read
a
Rich
mix
Dad.
of everything. I mean, I gotta stop and like just kind of point. I mean, that's like the what do they call that stuff? My mom used to take to like family picnics, Watergate salad maybe or something along those lines. It's like a little bit of everything is in there and it's just kind of mushed up and here we are. I don't mean to liken anything you said to Watergate, but I just mean it's nobody knows what's it's all in there. It's kind of a mishmash, but I like it.
No, I'm definitely a fart in a whirlwind.
There you go, and I like the park ranger part. That kinda brings a Yogi Bear element to the whole thing that we weren't really expecting, so, um, real quick before we jump into it, I know my audience, I want you to understand and know a little bit about so my audience knows, or if they've been listening very long, I'm a huge proponent of women in business, specifically women in. I particularly like the real estate business, but hey, I guess I have to be partial to one. But the main reasons are because my daughters. I've got two daughters who just because you seem to have this. Vibe where it's like, hey, I'm going to push back against the norm and I'm going to do things my way, and which is very much like the two little girls that I have at home, who we all adore and love about 60% of the time. Then 40% of the time, we want to, as my stepson says, give them up to the adoption center. And but ladies, women, and females in business is something that I'm a huge proponent of because, again, there's nothing I hate worse than when my daughter or daughters or either one of them say I can't do that, or only boys can do that, or I can't do that because I'm a girl, because they are taught on a daily basis that they can do whatever they set their mind to, no matter what it is. So it just seemed like
Absolutely.
you go along really well with my girls, and how you just push back and you're like, well, I'm going to do things my way, and I like that. I like that. So anyway, going forward, let's talk about 2015. I think you said you were that was the end of the park ranger stint, right?
It was 2 years before the end because I was so conditioned to my belief system of the whole job, career, retirement, live within your means, set yourself up for your average future. That's exactly what I was raised to be, right? Is
Sure,
that
sure.
American dream of
Yep.
settling, I guess. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2015, and that
Oh my gosh.
really blew my mind up because I was a pretty intelligent kid. School was pretty easy. Anything I put my mind to, I wouldn't just do. I would excel in, no matter what it was, even if it wasn't what I loved, which was like
Sure.
the law enforcement piece. You better believe if you put me in a fitness course, I'm gonna win the fitness competition, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean it's who I am. It's just I'm a I excel at everything I do, but I was miserable and I didn't know it because you don't know any different if you haven't seen any different. So it took me 2 years to undo the mindset that I was raised to have. Even when I was leaving my job, my dad's like, "Don't do something and quit your job." And then I was driving across the country because I moved from California. That's where I was the ranger to Virginia, which was my first thing. This was in 2017 when I pulled chocks, left the career, and I became a real estate agent as a stepping stone to bigger
Yep.
things. I was driving across the country, and my dad, I love my dad. It's like, "Melanie, I can't believe you quit your job. Don't ever call me for money." I'm like, "Thanks, Dad."
Yeah,
I
no
mean,
doubt.
but by
Appreciate the
the
support.
well, it's not his fault, right?
I
And a
understand.
dad or a parent doesn't say something like that because they want you to fail. They do that. They say that because they couldn't
That's
do what you're
really
doing and they love you,
Yep.
right? They don't want
Yep,
you to
absolutely. I'll
they
never
really
forget the
truly
day
he
I
really
told
truly
I started in as an agent myself, and I'll never forget the day I told my grandmother I was going to work. My grandmother and I were real close, and it was much the same way as I'm going to work for myself. And she's like, I can see her now, just with her head just going like this, just saying, and it wasn't it was just I don't know if that was her way of saying good luck or best. I don't know, but anyway, much the
it's
same
it's their
scenario.
own limitation and they're placing it on you, which is fine. They're doing the best they can and they really love you and they really are truly concerned. It's not because she wanted to hold you back. It's not because my dad wanted to hold me back. It was just so outside of his
Yeah,
comfort zone, right?
absolutely. Yep. Yep.
So by the time I had that conversation with him, I was very well prepared for it. I didn't say much, and I kind of took the attitude of, okay, thank you for the negative motivation. It's still motivation, but the next thing is I'm going to show you.
Yep.
I don't need to
Yep.
say anything. I'm just going to go and be successful, and that's it. That was my way of handling it. So, real estate agent 2.5 years, but I mostly served investors because by the time 2017 rolls around, I have spent hundreds, if not thousands, of hours on patrol listening to Bigger Pockets.
Yep, there you go. I mean, that's talk about using one time for I mean, that's the true essence of buying your time back. I mean, and educating yourself.
I probably wasn't the best government employee ever.
Well, you got the job done, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then I did the Rich Dad Poor Dad Elite Legacy $27,000 coaching program thing, so I had that under my belt and I had all the hours of listening. I was ready, right, to take
Yep.
it on. So when I became an agent, I knew that wasn't the end. I knew I gave myself 3 years. That was the amount of time that I was gonna be an agent. I got out of it in 2.5 years. But during those 2.5 years, started off real slow. It was very dry and painful the first 6 months. But once I took off because I started a meetup. I had all sorts of investor clients. And investors, they don't buy one house every 7 years. They buy 7 houses a year. So as soon as I got my base clientele, it was kind of I hit my stride. I had to start a team. I had to start handing off a lot of business. And then when the end of 2019 rolled around, I had made enough money and I had a big enough team that I told them I'm leaving. I sold everything. I had no belongings except my car. Booked a trip to Thailand and told them give me 6 months of runway where I would still get my splits as the team leader, and then I'll give you my book of business and the team can be yours. So that was the deal we made. I shipped off for Thailand in January. Spent a month there. and launched Freestyle Capital Group because I knew I wanted to move from obviously the agent thing, but I had picked apartment complexes and I had done Michael Blanc's coaching program for the apartment. We closed on our first apartment in January of 2020. That's while I was in Thailand, and that was kind of the start of the journey. But in the process of buying that 24 unit, I realized I didn't like most of the acquisition process. I really wasn't interested in managing a property manager. I really just like talking about money and investing and helping other people just like me get out of the rat race, get out of, get their money working for them and building that passive income so they could be financially free. So
Yep.
that's where my heart was. And that's why I kind of leaned toward the capital raising, launch Freestyle Capital Group. And that was the start of the path I'm on now.
Awesome. And of course, that's for the listeners that just so there's some context to what she's saying. Basically, she's talking about a SPV, special purpose vehicle, which is in essence another term for fund of funds or something along those lines of depending upon how I guess that really is just a fund of funds, honestly, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, that's basically at the end of the day exactly what it is. But
Yeah.
don't get caught up on the terms. But all right, so tell us specifically about your fund, how you got it started, and did what did it look like when you basically so you end up with a PPM, an operating agreement, and some contacts as far as operators to work with, right? And I'm assuming that all of that kind of is sitting there, and then you have to go out and get money. So how did all of that look, and what? Just kind of walk us through the steps.
Okay, so for the SPV, and so an SPV is a single purpose vehicle or a special purpose entity, SPE. There's the same thing, even a fund of funds. Those terms can all get interchanged. And depending on who's using them for what, companies can use them to keep risk out of the big part of the company. So they'll start an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, or a special whatever purpose entity, whatever, to do some other side business within the business. But for us in our space, if we are bringing capital to another sponsor, then we can form a single purpose vehicle, which is for the purpose of one identified. I mean, it could be multiple identified, but the idea is that they're identified. It's not a blind fund, it's a single purpose. So, um, starting in 2020, when I launched Freestyle Capital Group, I thought, oh, I'm going to raise money for X, Y, and Z. And so I'm just like sitting back, waiting for them to call me, right? Well,
Yep.
COVID happens. We get shut down in February of 2020. Nobody's buying deals. And it wasn't until like July, I started seeing some of my preferred operators buying deals. And I call them up, boop, bop, beep. Hello, guys. Hey, I see
Yep.
you just did a deal and you didn't call me. And they're like, oh, we're good, Melody. We had a dry spell for 6 months. We don't need money. And I'm like, okay, next one. And then they did a second deal and nothing. They didn't call me. So I thought, oh my goodness. I had all my eggs in the basket of these three operators who I thought for sure would be my guys, and they didn't call me. So, first lesson, if you are going to participate as a fund of funds or an SPV or whatever into a sponsorship, you need multiple sponsors. And at this point, I would say even hundreds of sponsors, because depending on how stringent you are on underwriting, I think I love a sponsor and they've got a big track record. They're doing 20 deals a year. And then I look at their underwriting and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would never raise capital for some of these guys. And they've got these huge platforms and doing all sorts of deals. So the first lesson is building those relationships, first of all, people that you can partner with. And depending on what type of person you are, like you're not going to do every deal that comes across your desk. In fact,
That's
you
right.
probably do like 5% of them or less.
Correct.
So it took a long time to do the first deal. The first deal came in July. We didn't close till September. And that was with someone who I think I met like a virtual meetup because, in 2020, those were big.
Everything was virtual in 2020.
Oh, wait, sorry. No, I didn't even do a deal in 2020. It was 2021. It was literally a year and a half before I did my first deal. Sorry. So I lost all of 2020. And that was where I went to a ton of virtual
Okay,
meetups.
so let's back up real quick. I think I need to clarify for the listeners. I think there's probably going to be a little bit of confusion around this this topic. And when she's talking about a single purpose vehicle, basically what's happening is an operator underwrites a property and sets up an acquisition, signs a contract, calls her and says, Melanie, I need you to, or would you be good raising, say, $2 million of our $5 million capital need? Then Melanie raises it into that vehicle. Then that vehicle invests in 123 Main Street apartment complex deal with that selected operator. Now, which is essentially how a fund of funds works, same interchangeable term. However, a fund of funds can also be, like, for instance, my fund is set up to cater to three specific operators who also have funds. So we are taking pooled capital and investing it for diversification purposes across multiple operators within the fund. So we talk a lot about fund of funds on here. So I thought it definitely needed to be explained, because when you talk about a single purpose vehicle, that's why you're talking about then the timing of a certain deal. So you're privy to all the underwriting, you're privy to all of the basically everything, and then you step in, I'm assuming under maybe slightly preferential terms, if you can. Um, am I right? Am I right in that matter? Now, some of the preferential terms have gone away as there's been a bunch of capital that's been in the marketplace. Some of the preferential terms have kind of dried up as far as like, um, but I'm assuming there's some preference somewhere for them to call you and say, Melanie, will you raise $2 million of our deal? We'll give you a 1% better pref or a 10% better split on the backside, something along those lines. And that's typically why somebody would go to a person like Melanie to invest with her, because then she's getting preferential treatment from the operator, then she can pass that preferential treatment back to her investors. Now, am I right about all of that? Is that pretty much how everything is set up?
Yes, but more importantly, we're dealing in securities. So it's not just like I raise capital and bring capital to a deal. That's not how it works at all. I'm not a broker dealer. I don't have a license to do that. So I
Correct.
actually have always gotten GP shares, and I have a job on the GP. I am still, as the operator, the manager of the fund or fund of funds, I have jobs on the GP that make me an actual partner in the sponsorship.
Okay.
Even though my fund is just an LP, I am a GP. Or I've structured it before where my SPV gets the GP shares, and then my
Gotcha.
my upside or my payday comes at the end when we exceed returns. Then that's when my payday
Gotcha.
comes. So
Yeah.
I always try to get paid from the sponsor, so I don't have to dilute the investor returns at all. And that's typically in the form of GP shares. It could be in the form of a due diligence fee. It could be anything could be negotiated. But at the end of the day, yes, we can.
Yeah.
If you write a bigger check, you can get preferential treatment and you can qualify for different classes of shares, but not always.
And I think it's important to point out for the listeners as well that when we talk about FINRA and we talk about securities and what we're doing here, it's very ultra, actually it's ultra important to point out that none of the compensation from the operator or the entity or the property that's associated with the deal can come to somebody like Melanie based on how much capital. Like, they can't call Melanie up and say, hey, if you raise $5 million, I'll pay you $500,000. It has she's going in as a qualified partner on the GP because she actually has responsibilities, like maybe, let's say, like, for instance, maybe a marketing gig inside the company, where, like, they say, hey, Melanie, you take care of the marketing, you take care of the graphic design part, and that's going to be your job as far as the GP side goes. And so those, obviously those are examples, and probably not exactly what you do, but I guess I think it's just ultra important that people really, really understand that these things are, you have to just tread lightly. This can't be something you just go into and just splash and start throwing capital around and buying it, because you will tread over into SEC regulated territory fairly easily if you're not careful. And the SEC is pretty much not your friend most of the time.
No, they don't exist to help us at all. They exist to
No, and
protect the American people.
a lot of people think that if you get in trouble with them, the SEC is going to call up and say, "Hey, well, so you messed up," and no, they're going to call and they're going to say, "We want your email server. We want every email you've ever sent. We want your computers. We want everything here. It has to be sent to us at your expense and your attorney." I mean, and it's just boom. I mean, they're no joke. Like they don't they're not there to be like, "Oh, make you give a warm and fuzzy feeling like your mom used to do." It's no, it's boom, boom, boom. We want this, and you're guilty until you send us enough stuff to prove that you're innocent.
Yeah, we don't want to.
Go ahead.
We don't want to go there by any means.
No. So
Um,
anyway, proceed. I'm sorry.
no, I was. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. The SPV. So the first deal I did was an SPV, a fund of funds. So yes, the fund has its own PPM, its own subscription agreement, everything, and then the fund is an entity by itself, and that's what invests as the LP in the sponsors deal. So if you're wanting to do something like this, you need a deal to raise for, right? You need a deal to participate in, and you don't have to be a GP or have co-GP shares. You just can't get paid anyway from the operator unless you do. So you can negotiate higher splits because if you can come in, you put all your friends in an SPV and you all go together and you can write a $5 million check, you better believe they're going to give you some treatment above,
Preferred
you know.
treatment. Yep.
So I mean, if you were trying to get paid, then at that point you could just take a promote or have a fee of some sort in the fund, but then you're diluting investor shares. So that's why I try to get paid from the sponsor. And honestly, if I am bringing an investor capital and they're limited partners and they have no say in anything, and I bring it to a deal, I want GP shares. I want to be on I want to vote. I want to sit at the table when big decisions are being made because I need to do that and represent the people in my SPV or my fund. So, yeah, so I did my first SPV. It was actually 2021. So all of 2020, I was just building the database, talking to sponsors, looking at deals, throwing out deals. And 2020 was a hard year anyway to do deals. So it was just kind of like a whole lost year to me. But
Yep.
when we went virtual and everybody was on virtual meetups, virtual conferences, virtual everything, I was all over the nation, sitting in my chair at my house in Boise or Salt Lake or
Yep.
Arizona, wherever I was. I was homeless, nomadic at the time. I was living all over the place. So um, 2020 was a year of building the relationships, and this is going to be very important for what I think what we're going to talk about later for the raising capital and finding people. Right? I do it different.
Yep.
I don't do it the way of a funnel. I don't have a big funnel with thousands of people. I target a small group of people who reinvest with me over and over. So the relationship piece is huge. It goes for investors, but it goes for sponsors as well because sponsors need to trust you, like you, and want to work with you as well.
And part of what you touched on back a few sentences ago, I like talking about alignment of interests, and I think that I think that's a term or a topic that gets passed over too many times in some of these discussions. And again, with some of the more complicated dynamics of a fund of fund, alignment of interests is huge, and especially with what you're talking about, where like for instance, you said I don't want to dilute investor funds. If and when you start raising capital and you look back and if your investors ever feel sub aligned, and maybe that's not even a term, but sub aligned, I mean, hey, he's out looking out for himself before he's has any interest in even talking about our money. And if you ever become sub aligned with your investors, man, you're in some trouble there, because not necessarily in financial trouble or jail trouble or anything like that, but you're in a position where reinvestment becomes less and less likely the further down that path you go. So alignment of interests is really big. And again, I think that the industry as a whole, that almost needs to become more of a topic on the forefront of discussion, I guess, is making sure that as you raise capital, your investors always feel like you're all in with them, not I'm sorry, for them and with them, but not yourself ahead of the game. So, hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cash Flow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show. Go ahead. I'd like to hear a little more about where you were headed with that.
I was just saying I did one SPV. So after that, I did a couple of co-GP deals, and co-GP is where you're going direct with the sponsor. You're part of the sponsorship team. You're using their portal, and the investors go directly into the deal with their PPM and their investor portal. You are just a partner of the sponsorship team. So my first one, the SPV, was a multifamily in San Antonio, and then I did an assisted living co-GP, and I did a triple net co-GP. And then the next one, I launched a fund. So it's a full blown fund, but it's not a blind fund. It is a customizable fund. So it's deal by deal, and it still acts like a fund of funds. But now everyone's just in one fund. You sign the PPM one time, and then you can be in multiple deals, and you can pick which deals. If I have a storage deal, an apartment deal, an assisted living deal, and a triple net deal, and you only want to be in the assisted living and the apartment deal, then that's what you choose. So the calculation that the software does is calculated based on how long and in which deals you're in. So you can it's like Robinhood for stocks. It's Robinhood for syndication. So that's
Sure.
the route I ended up going. Why? Because SPVs, if people want to do that, it's expensive. Every
Yeah.
time you put legal documents together like that, you're out of pocket 10 to 15 grand just to do an SPV.
Yep. I mean, I'll never forget. I wired 9,000 of my own money to my attorney to pay for mine, and my wife was like, "What? Excuse me?" And that's money off the top to
Yeah.
start. That's before you ever raise a dollar. So, all right. So, with that being said, we've hopefully got a clear as mud idea as far as the listeners are concerned about what this SPV is, and just know it's an element that you're raising capital for. So, with that being said, tell us, let's hear the first story about the first time you raised capital, like not as a whole, but like your first person that finally said, "Hey, I'll give you capital." I mean, what were some of the objections? Was it hard to overcome? And then I'd like to move into maybe hearing about your raise as a whole.
So with raising for an SPV, if people are used to doing just straight into syndications, you have that extra layer of the fund that you have to explain, and you might have an extra layer of splits or however you're getting paid, which you have to explain. So just make sure you understand your value, and then you understand, I mean, make them understand that they're getting actually a better deal. It's better to go through me than direct to the sponsor because we've gotten better economies of scale, right? Or whatever it is that you're presenting, you have to be prepared to talk through that. So that was one of the first hurdles, I think, raising for an SPV versus just raising for a syndication, because it's a little learning experience just for the
Yep.
investors and yourself if you've never done it before. Um, some people look at the deal really hard, and you have to answer hard questions about a capex plan or assumptions for rent increases or expenses or a cap rate expansion or whatever it is. Like that, some people dig into the numbers, and some people, they just want to know how much money you have in the deal, right?
Yep.
So I can't really say there were a bunch of big objections. Some people decided not to invest because of the SPV. They didn't understand that structure.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. It was a good time. 2021, we weren't seeing the effects of all the money that we printed, right? So it's not like today where you have a lot more to consider, like the debt piece and the assumptions and inflation. Is that affecting expenses? Back in 2021, those weren't the things that people were asking. Uh,
Sure. Sure.
yeah.
What was your best source of investors?
So back when I was an agent and I had all those investors that came to my meetup, I had 500 or 600 people on that list. That's a huge source of my database right now is my Virginia clients and people that came to my meetup. Outside
That
of that, people I've met probably at meetups, people I've met in person at conferences. Conferences are big for me. I do a lot of those. A few people trickle in from social media or something, but a lot less. Most people are people I've connected with in person or
okay.
they're referred to
And
me.
and that's I think, and it's hard to explain sometimes, but I liken it to, you know, if you drop one hook in the water, you're gonna may or may not catch one fish. If you drop 1,000 hooks in the water, you have basically at least 1,000 chances to catch. And that's what I always try to tell folks when we're looking at marketing, because I get that question on, where do you find investors, who else is in these deals with you, and how do you source them, and where you look at it and say, okay, it's those relationships, and then those relationships, if each person, your has however many people that they're associated with, then you start going through the degrees of separate, you know what I'm saying? You could start penetrating into getting more folks referred directly to you. So do you handle like investor calls? You just do all of that yourself?
Yeah, because I don't have a huge database. I'm on a lot of podcasts. I don't have a podcast. I have a YouTube channel that I stopped. I haven't posted anything probably since 2021. Mine's really relationship based and
Yeah,
really connecting with people. And what I'm looking for, because my fund is a 506c fund, meaning they need to be accredited, I need to find people who can invest over and over again. Because honestly, if I could get away with having 50 households that I serve, that's it. 50 people that invest and reinvest with me a few times a year, I would be done. I
yeah,
don't want to go and have some really heavy duty funnel that's retargeting people. I get enough of those in my email and I don't like them. So why would I go spam other people? And I'm not
sure,
saying it's wrong. There are people that raise a lot of money because they've got, an on point like marketing program. And maybe I've been a little slow, but the people who invest with me, I know them very well. I've been
yep,
to
and
Mexico
that's
with some. I travel, I see them, I'm in town, I meet with them. They can call
yep,
me anytime. That's how I want to build my business. That's just one way, is like the relational
sure.
way, or there's the big platform and the funnel way for sure.
Yep. And that's like my grandfather used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I mean, just because you get business done one way does not mean it's wrong. As long as it suits you, fills your needs, and makes your investors good returns and everybody's happy, then hey, you have, again, with that same, you drop 1,000 hooks, it's a whole lot easier to make 50 people happy than it is keep 1,000 people happy. So it makes perfect sense, and there's no, again, there anybody that would push back and say, well, you're doing it wrong, is obviously probably not doing anything themselves. So, well, with that being said, Melanie, we're getting kind of close to our time here, and we have a couple of questions that we ask every guest that comes on the show. And there's no right or wrong answer, but the first of those questions is, what is the best book that you have either recently read or are currently reading?
The best book ever?
Well, and we try to stay away from a couple of things. I usually don't announce this, but we try to stay away from Rich Dad Poor Dad and the Bible, because obviously those are two books that everybody has some degree of connection to, and
That's
so
what
we
what
want
an
to,
honor for Robert Kiyosaki to be carrying at that
yeah, to get
level
his
with
book,
the
to get
Bible.
his book and the Bible set to the side. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right.
That's
So
funny. So Rich Dad Poor Dad would be my number one choice, but it really changed my life. But the next book, and I read it right around the same time as Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it was that book that really helped me shift my mindset so I could change from employee to entrepreneur, is a book called
yep,
The Power of Now. And it's by Eckhart Tolle. It's a little woo woo, it's a little out there, but it's about, living in the present moment and, you know, getting to know who you truly are and what your purpose is for life, and nothing else matters that much. Like, we don't need the picket fence. We don't need whatever culture is designed for us. You can break free from that. So that book, The Power of Now, is just really about the past is past. We don't even know if it actually happened, honestly. The future is not promised. So right now is what you have. So you just need to do what makes you happy now. And if that's to build your own business, you do that. If that's to be an employee, which I doubt it is, then you do that.
Well, that's much what you just said about your business. I mean, hey, exactly. I mean, this just because, yeah. I mean, and that's the power of now. And again, take control now and make things happen. So, all right, what is now? Obviously, this is going to be kind of a question that could garner, I'm sure, 100 answers from you. But I want to know maybe if we can narrow it down to at least a couple. What is a dream vacation that you have taken or hope to take?
Let's go with hope to take because the past is the past. I've been a lot of places. I want to go on an Amazon River cruise. Safari is high on the list. In fact, I was on a call earlier today talking to a tour company for a Kenya safari for this year.
Hmm,
Those would be at the top
man.
of my list. But of course, Egypt pyramids and the Holy Lands, and I mean, there's so many places I want to go. It's not even funny.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I will tell you that there is trying to think. Oh, Madagascar. If I was going to do safaris, I think Madagascar would be. I don't know if it's just the vegetation that changes. I don't know, but it's just that's such a. I'm just so enamored with Madagascar specifically as far as that kind of stuff goes. But I don't know if you can see the big. Can you see all of the big five in Madagascar? I'm not
I
sure.
have no idea. It's so
I don't
different.
know
So
either.
Kenya is close to my heart because I've been supporting a child there since 2010. I think I'm actually my third or fourth child by now.
Sure,
So
sure.
that's kind of why. But yeah, you see the big five there in Tanzania. Madagascar, they probably have something different because other parts of Africa is like the Congo. You see the gorillas and stuff. Like Africa is so diverse in
Yeah, and
things.
I
I'm not
think
sure what Madagascar has. Maybe you'd
yeah,
watch the cartoon.
yeah. There you go. Watch the cartoon, and figure it out. So,
Yeah.
I saw a guy one time. I remember it was in 2005, I think. And you're going to call me crazy when I tell you this, but in 2005, I watched it. Now this is pre Facebook being huge, pre tons of social media. This guy had his own website,
MySpace.
and huh?
MySpace.
Yeah, we had MySpace, right? So, and maybe that's where I picked it up. I can't even remember. But I watched a guy. He swam the entire length of the Amazon River. Now, I know you're going to say, "Hey, there's no way that bad." This guy swam the entire length of the Amazon River, and that is a fact. Piranhas, crocodile, I mean, whatever it was, every snakes, I mean, everything. Now he wore a dry suit, and he had a boat or a raft or whatever, whatever the vehicle of choice is for the Amazon, that followed him. But they documented it, they filmed the whole thing, and every day he would swim 2 or 3 miles, and then one day he would was feeling sick and wouldn't swim much, then he would swim 4 or 5 miles. And it was absolutely, to me, it was one of those moments in time where when he completed it, I was like, man can do anything man wants to do. And that is, if you need to look it up, I didn't remember the guy's name, but I checked it every morning, and they had a live feed you could watch.
Wow.
And again, it was pre all of this reality stuff. And anyway, it's pretty cool. So, all right. Well, listen, Melanie, if somebody heard something and they want to reach out to you and get in touch with you, what is the best way for that to happen?
Uh, I mean, my website has all the ways to get into, learning more about me, or just my emails, Melanie@freestylecapitalgroup.com. Pretty easy to remember that one.
Awesome. Good. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And listeners, if you liked what you heard today, please, please, please scroll down, give us a 5-star review, give us a review of the show, and let us know what you liked. And I want to thank everybody for their time. Melanie, especially you, thank you again for carving the time out to be with us. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day. Cashflow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.